issues in the Pacific Islands or on the Pacific Island forums. These kind of issue areas are driving middle power competition, and we're seeing an increasing leadership position, I think, from some of those middle powers within the region.
Just to add to that, because I think it's really interesting, when you look at the BRI, it's all about infrastructure connectivity. And you look at the Defense Indo-Pacific Strategy that came out in June from the United States. It's a really security document. And these are at the other end of the poles. But then you see what's happening in the region, whether it's ASEAN, whether it's India, whether it's Australia, whether it's Japan, even South Korea with its Northeast Asia plus Alpha strategy. They're not securitarized and they're not purely infrastructure. There's this huge push on rules-based behavior. And it's not just in the maritime domain, but it's rules-based behavior across the board. And traditional economy, digital economy, but also in the maritime domain as well. And, you know, those countries have the most to lose. And if you're interested in kind of the views of the region, in June, I think, ASEAN came out with the ASEAN survey, 2019. And it surveyed 4,000 policymakers in ASEAN. What do they think are the challenges of the region? And they're pretty clear. You know, they don't want to choose between a security partner and their economic partner. They're worried about China, they're worried about the United States, and they want much more Japan, much more Australia, much more India. And they want it to boost a rules-based system across the board.
I've got Susan, and then Phil, and then Charles.
This panel to me is a little scary, and I'll tell you why. It seems to me, with the exception of Marion, there used to be consensus related to national security and trade. And I think more and more as this data has become a national security issue, and the digital economy has become a national security issue, that consensus is broken down. Whether we're talking about how open society should be, disinformation, right? Whether we're talking about heat maps, which expose where soldiers are in Afghanistan. I don't want to get too much into it, but it does seem to me that the digital economy is unraveling because of AI, because of 3D printing. It is unraveling traditional rule of law conceptions and national security conceptions. And I think, I can't speak, I am an American, and there are Chinese people here too as well. I think there is a real disgust with what Trump did regarding national security and steel among Congress. And in fact, it's looking more likely that Chuck Grassley, who's the chairman of Senate Foreign Relations, as an aside, has now come up with a text that will soon have legislation that checks the president's power on trade. And that's, I think, very, very necessary because the United States is a brief among nations in that the president, even though Congress really has held a tight leash because of fast track, the president really determines how trade policy is, foreign policy, and national security. So that's thing one. But then in terms of data, in my mind, and again, maybe I'm the only person that thinks this, please correct me if I'm wrong, much of data is not traded. And, when you use Facebook, there is no trade that occurs. There's no transaction. So I'm kind of freaked out that this is even a discussion on a trade issue, or even that we should be even thinking about governing these trade agreements. And that in itself is very much a threat to middle powers, I think, because the hegemons, those who have lots of data, are going to set the world up. And that is two countries.
I'm going to take the Phil and Charles question forward and come back to the panel.
Thanks, Phil Calvert. I was just, this is more a comment than a question. I appreciate the discussion of middle powers and CPTPP, and especially the discussion of Taiwan, because it seems to me that CPTPP text was written so that Taiwan could join. So I think that's a pretty obvious sort of move people could take without violating anything or having to get into complicated discussions about subnational regions, et cetera, et cetera. But I would question whether, from a Canadian perspective, whether it is there's been discussion about possible U.S. membership, possible Chinese membership, if they're interested in it, whether it's actually in Canada's interests to have either of those countries as members of the CPTPP. Certainly, as we've heard today, this impetus toward anti-globalization, nationalism, inward-lookingness on the part of the United States isn't just around one man. It's a systemic cultural, attitudinal changes taking place. Similarly, we've seen with China, whatever rules are in place, they don't pay a tremendous lot of attention to them when other interests arise. So to have the global the center of gravity right now in the CPTPP would be with Japan in terms of economic power, but to have both China or the U.S. in it would shift that center of gravity. To have both of them members of it would essentially put the middle powers back in the same situation that you've been talking about, being squeezed between two powers without any kind of other organization to protect themselves. So that's basically my comment.
Charles?
Well, I want to comment on the middle power thing too, because the traditional rap, I think, for middle powers was maybe 2 or 3 raps. One was that they were free riders, tendency to free ride. And so if you look at the GATT system in the 50s and 60s, a certain middle power was always seen as waiting till the common market in those days, and the Americans were able to make a deal, and then they climbed onto the deal free through the extension of favored nation treatment. I won't mention which middle power that was, but anyway, it was controversial at the time. Secondly, that a lot of middle power interests are reactive and self-interested, rather than they're really systemic and global in their interest. So the code of conduct in the South China Sea is an example of that. It's reactive. It doesn't have meaning beyond that. And even something like the CPTPP, I mean, in a sense, it was initiated by small powers before, but it was, as Don said, driven by the United States, and one wonders whether it would ever have been created, except for the Americans having been there at that time. And the third wrap is that middle power cooperation is often meaningless. For example, this is small power, but Singapore, Iceland free trade agreement. There is one. There's actually a free aviation agreement that allows Icelandic Air to have a hub in Singapore, and vice versa. So these are, so the question really is how you, and I don't mean to wrap middle power because I think middle power should step up in this period, how you connect middle powers better with systemic interest and with entrepreneurial power in creating globally relevant model institutions.
Okay, let's tackle that bit of it. Who wants to start?
I think Phil and Charles's question has overlap, so I'll just touch upon this. Phil's assumption, it's kind of a back to the future kind of assumption that the middle powers might stop free riding, and if the United States comes back and functions and acts as we've been traditionally used to. I think that assumption is probably flawed. I don't think the United States is going to come and act as it used to, and whether many of the panelists mentioned today, I don't think that is what we would expect, even if we don't see a second term of Mr. Trump. So then, what is the role? And this goes to Charles's comment about reactive versus proactive. I agree. I think that the middle powers have been reactive, but I think that they moved into a proactive period. It was the Japanese that took this free and open Pacific, Indo-Pacific context, and they put it on the plate of the current President of the United States. And they were the ones that were pushing it forward. In terms of data free flow and trust, that's not coming out of the United States. That's coming out of Japan. This is proactive behavior, that they're looking at the region. What are their needs? How can they form a consensus? And they realize they need the United States buy-in, but they also realize the United States is probably not going to be the one that's going to come up with this first. They're trying to force a consensus, and you've seen it with the Japanese going to the Australians and other countries saying this is what we need to do. So I think that you're correct. They've moved from they are reactive and self-interested, that they've moved into a